I just want to start off by thanking everyone for taking time out of their schedules to join us today. I am Kiera Hopkins. I'm the CEO of Survive and Tell. We are a domestic violence nonprofit that specifically focuses on officer-involved domestic violence and the issues that their victims encounter. But in addition to advocacy, we have community outreach initiatives such as this town hall today. So I just want to go ahead and introduce Elisa Carter. She is our Director of Operations. Lisa, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and just talk about a little bit of the things that you've been doing in your work.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I am Elisa Carter. I am a Harrisburg native. I currently reside in the DMV area. I work in education now, but more recently, I've been delving into the field of sex trafficking advocacy. So I now work with the DMV hotline, working with the victims of sex trafficking and domestic violence.
Thank you, Lisa. So we are here today to discuss with the mayoral candidates their agendas and their plans for the city. Primaries are May 18th, and so I believe it's just very important that the voters of the city have as many opportunities as possible to have their voices heard, as well as address any concerns that they have in their community. So I want to just go ahead and introduce the candidates that we have here with us today. We have Otto Banks. Otto Banks is a community leader and former city councilman. As a councilman, he helped to reduce poverty, oversaw complex city programs, and served on the mayor's task force on racial equality. In addition to his service to the city, the White House appointed him to several key positions in the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, such as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Economics. As executive director of the Reach Foundation, Banks has promoted academic excellence and is a staunch supporter of school choice. Next, we have Mayor Papenfuse. Mayor Eric Papenfuse is the incumbent mayor and has been in that role since 2014. A successful businessman, Papenfuse promised to build a better community, through attracting business and investment and improving education in our state capital with the model Together We Can. Papenfuse is the owner of the Midtown Scholar Bookstore, which is a bookstore located in the Midtown area of Harrisburg. Last but certainly not least, we have Dave Schankweiler. Schankweiler, for over 30 years, him and his wife have owned and operated a company that employed over 150 employees. As the head of Journal Multimedia, he created The Best Places to Work in PA, which is a publication that highlights and recognizes employees that build positive relationships and maintain positive relationships with their customers and their employees. As a passionate supporter of education, Schankweiler was one of the founders of Harrisburg University. After being asked to lead the Harrisburg's Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, he resigned in order to run for mayor, where he believes he'll be more effective in improving the city. We have 4 representatives. We had 5, but one just had an emergency, so I'm going to read her question, but I will introduce these representatives before they ask their questions. But for now, I just want to kind of go over the format of the town hall and how we're going to do this. Each representative will have an opportunity to ask their question. Before they ask their question, I will give a brief introduction in their bios. Once they ask their question, each candidate will have an opportunity to respond to that question. We're going to keep the responses limited to 3 minutes just for time's sake. At the 1-minute mark, Elisa will put up a thumbs up emoji, just signaling that you have 1 minute left. So just please keep an eye out for Elisa's screen. When you see that thumbs up emoji, you know that you have about 1 more minute to wrap up. At the end of your 3 minutes, she will thank you for your response and we'll move on to the next candidate. Just to keep it fair, we're going to rotate which candidates answer first. We're going to start alphabetically, which means Mr. Banks, just by his last name, will answer the first question first, followed by Mayor Papenfuse and then Schankweiler. But for the next question, we'll rotate and have Mayor Papenfuse answer first, followed by Schankweiler and then Banks, and just continue to rotate just to make sure each candidate has an opportunity to answer the questions first. After the representatives from each topic have asked their question, I do have follow-up questions that I would like to ask. You can choose to answer these questions or choose not to. That is your choice. If you would like to answer the question, just please put your hands up or your clapping emoji. I'm sorry, actually the raise hand emoji, and Elisa will choose you to answer at that time. Are there any questions before we get started? All right, so we're going to start off with Anya Boatwright. She is going to be asking a question in regards to crime and violence. Anya is a Harrisburg resident with deep ties to the community. She is a mother and she has experienced loss. She has lost multiple relatives as recent as December of 2020 due to gun violence. So she just has a question on what your plans are for the city in order to decrease crime and violence in our city. Anya, you may ask your question.
Okay. What steps are being taken to manage gun control or lack thereof in Harrisburg? And also, how soon can we expect to see an improvement in gun-related violence?
Mr. Banks, just based off your last name, you're going to answer first, if that's okay. Your mic is muted. Sorry.
That question is more germane to Mayor Papenfuse to speak on what he's actually done. I mean, because it's more direct. However, I can share with you my strategy on curbing gun violence if that's appropriate.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. For me, the best way that you address crime in the city of Harrisburg is through the increase of opportunity. Many of the people in our city, I firmly believe, would not be engaged in criminal acts if given the opportunity to have meaningful employment. So if you actually give me a job, I'm less apt to go out in the streets and make money or go through your windows. So that is one of the major ways that I would curb violence and crime in our community, by the increase of opportunity. The other way that you address crime, of course, my plan is a bifurcated approach. The other way, of course, is to identify the highest crime areas in our city and strategically insert police officers in that particular area. We need more policing. We need more patrols patrolling the community, in addition to police officers actually walking in the community and being engaged in the community and getting to know the very people that they're sworn to serve and protect. After all, public safety should be the central focus in our community, as opposed to strong arm techniques to inciting fear in the community. We need to work closely alongside the community to make them feel as though that they're partners, that their voices are heard, and that they're being respected. Another issue I believe is central to policing in our community is just equality in the administration of justice. I don't care if you're Black, brown, Latino, LGBTQ+, every person should be treated with equal respect. Moreover, another issue that occurs in our community that could also be helpful is stop treating the victim as if they're the one that's committed the crime. On far too many occasions, our police officers will respond to a call, and the next thing you know, they're running background checks on the very person who called the police and asked for their support. They're made to feel unwelcome. They're made to feel unwelcome. So with that being said, those are the main ways that I would address the crime and violence. One, of course, is the increase of opportunity, and two, the increase of police presence, patrols, and strategically sourcing them in high crime areas as a way of preventing crime and preventing the proliferation or the act. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. Mayor Papenfuse, you may answer.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Thank you. Thank you for having this forum, and thanks for inviting us all. I think the question was about gun control and specifically gun violence. And one of the things which I think people need to realize is that we have a vast proliferation of illegal guns in the city of Harrisburg. And try as we might to get them off the street, there seems to be an almost endless supply. One thing Commissioner Carter has been working on has been an effort to take guns off the street. I have an example of a graph here. I'll see if I can do it without sharing my screen. I'll put it right up there so you can see, which shows that we've taken over 1,300 guns off the street just in the past several years. And yet, as I say, there's an almost endless supply. And that's because we need common sense gun control reform on the state and the federal level. It's something which the city can advocate for, but ultimately we need partners. One of the reasons that I like to work with groups like Mayors Against Illegal Guns and Ceasefire PA and others is because there's a lot of advocacy we can do. But frankly, this is one of the major differences between myself and my other opponents that are on today. Otto's been a Republican for the past 15 years. Until recently, Dave was a Republican for his whole life. It's the Republican Party which is pushing against gun control and against the reforms that we need to see, the reforms of straw purchasers, the need for national reporting of lost and stolen weapons. In fact, Dave's political consultants that he's hired, this Churchill Strategies, they're one of the architects and proponents of something called preemption, which is the doctrine which has been working to repeal the city's gun control ordinances that we have on the books. We have a number of ordinances on the books that says you do have to report your guns lost or stolen in the city. You can't carry a gun in a playground. You can't go outside and just start shooting your gun in the air. Those were challenged in court by pro-gun groups, and we have been fighting against them and fighting the Republican legislature to keep them in place. And we're currently before the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania right now with an argument, an amicus brief with the city of Philadelphia that basically says we have a right under the Pennsylvania Constitution to common sense gun control and reforms that protect our populace and protect the public. So this is a major difference. You can't be a member of the Republican Party and for that long working so hard against gun control and then be shocked that there's so many guns on the street of Harrisburg. One of the larger issues that we have, and you can stop me when my time is up because I don't have a clock in front of me, is how we can reform the Harrisburg Police Department to get more officers in the community, walking the beat, making relationships with the neighborhoods, and we're doing that through a new investment in what's called the Community Services Division. It's a civilian division in the Department of Harrisburg. It's a way, instead of just adding more uniformed patrol officers, we're trying to add people from the community. We're hiring CSAs and some social workers and other things, and that's part of the big strategy. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Schankweiler?
Good afternoon, and thank you for hosting today's discussion. Another shooting incident yesterday off of 13th Street, 5 deaths this year. All 22 neighborhoods have been affected over the last couple years. Last year was our highest murder rate in the city in 30 years. And if you look at our per capita rate, our per capita death rate from violent crime is higher than Chicago and Philadelphia. I've knocked on over 4,000 doors. I've talked to many of our city residents. This is the #1 issue they talk about. Unfortunately, City Hall isn't talking about it or putting any action plans in place. This is what I do, what I would do on day one when I became mayor. I'd have a citywide summit on violent prevention. I'd bring together city council, our public safety officials, business, education, faith, nonprofit, and community leaders, with the goal of having a unified strategy coming out of that session to deal with our violent crime and problems in the city. Now, what would that plan include? Here's some of the things I'd like to see on that plan, and I would be working on to get them approved from that summit and then going to city council for an emergency meeting on violence prevention. First of all, community policing. I hear that a lot at our doors. People say, Dave, we need to see more officers in our neighborhoods. Yes, I've had issues with our police. I've been pulled over unnecessarily, but that doesn't stop our neighbors from wanting people and police in our neighborhood, knowing our neighborhoods. Youth programming. We do not have any kind of youth programming in the city. We need after school, we need weekend, we need summer programming for our youth of all ages. Let's get them off of running around the neighborhoods. Let's get structured programming, not only in sports, but arts and culture and other items to interest our young people in the city. We need to look at our street lighting and make sure that all street lights work. And where do we need more street lighting in areas? We need to look at trash and blight because that hurts neighborhoods as well and leads to crime. And then we need to look at job growth and what we need to do in a city that has a higher unemployment rate than our outside area. And what can we do to enhance jobs in the city? You know, I talk about community policing. Had we had a strong community policing program in this city, we'd be like cities like St. Paul, St. Petersburg, and Newark. Last year, our violent crime rate increased 60%. If you visit those three cities, they only increased 13, 5, and in Newark, they had a 0% increase. And those three cities will tell you it's because of a strong community policing. It's not only about police present in the neighborhoods, it's about relationships among different members of the community, relationships with community groups, and being at the table to talk about this very issue of violent crime.
Thank you, Mr. Schankweiler.
Thank you.
Mr. Banks, I see that you have your hand raised. Would you like an opportunity to respond? If so, we can allow you guys to do so and just give you a minute to respond. Can you unmute his mic, please? Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to respond to Mr. Papenfuse's statement. In the city of Harrisburg, and of course, as you just heard Schankweiler respond that we had a 60% increase, the mayor had 8 years to address these issues. Every time one of our children die in the streets, he's gone. When our people in the community were dying from COVID, he was gone. And what makes anyone think if we give him 4 more years, he's going to be here, because he wasn't here over the last 8. Thank you.
In efforts to remain fair, if there's anyone else who would like to respond, we will allow you a minute to respond once you've answered your questions. If not, we can go ahead and move forward. I did want to ask.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I'll take a minute if I can. I'm very much present, Otto, and I'm present every day. I go to work very hard, and if you look at the statistics for crime as a whole in Harrisburg, it's down. It's been down every year. It's a continuous arc, and it's been down. Is the murder rate too high? Yes, it is. But frankly, that is more than any one individual can handle. It's something that requires collective solutions. It requires the partnerships, which I agree we need to see. And part of what we're focused on with our community policing strategy is lifting up neighborhood groups and organizations. We have a prototype of this partnership in the South Allison Hill Safety Project this year. We're working with Tri-County. We're working with Wild Heart. We're working with the Latino Center. We're working on a combined approach which uses city dollars to help neighborhoods be safer, and uses a crime analyst and the substation and careful monitoring of things like blight and streetlights and the crime rate in an effort to help make Harrisburg safer.
Thank you, Mayor Papenfuse.
Okay, my follow-up question is actually what you've already addressed, and it's community policing. I know both community members and law enforcement are outraged in the uptick in violence. So my question for all the candidates, or for Otto Banks and Dave Schankweiler, are what are your plans on going about building trust in the Black communities or in the minority communities who are typically or historically distrustful of police, so that we can implement and establish community policing similar to what Lancaster has done? For Mayor Papenfuse, what has been the hiccup, or why hasn't community policing already been implemented in the city of Harrisburg? If you would like to answer your question, you can raise your hand, or not. It's your choice whether you want to answer the follow-up question.
I can answer the follow-up question if you'd like me to. Community policing is implemented in Harrisburg. It's there, but what we've looked to do this past year is to increase the number of civilians that are partnering. It can't just be a uniformed patrol solution. We can't just have uniformed officers. What we need is individuals that are from the community, that reflect the community, that understand the community. And that's what we're trying to do with the community service aides. We are in the process of hiring 7 of these aides. They were approved in last year's budget. They grew out of a lot of community discussions. And they are going to help us sort of transform the relationships with the community on a local level. We're doing that, and we're also instituting this year a new police review board, which is going to be a volunteer board with appointments of folks who live in the various policing districts of Harrisburg. You put those two things together, and you're going to see a marked improvement in terms of community policing relations, one that makes the community safer for everyone.
Can I speak?
Yes, I believe I saw Mr. Banks and Schankweiler stand up. Can we go to Banks first and then We'll allow Schankweiler to respond.
And just to clarify, could you please repeat the question again, just to make sure that we're all on the same page?
Yes, my question was like, what are your plans on how would you plan on implementing community policing? Like, as what you're seeing in Lancaster, Lancaster has actually hired social workers that serve as liaisons between the law enforcement community as well as the regular community. And they also have like NAACP members that come and talk to the community and hold events and talk about use of force and pretty much reforming police in their city. I wanted to know what would your plans be in order to do something similar in Harrisburg?
Okay, yeah, I have actually a 10-point plan, which starts, of course, with opportunity, as I addressed earlier, that one of the best ways to address policing in itself and crime in itself is to create opportunities for our residents, which historically have been blocked out, which has been evidenced, of course, by all the construction with lack of minority participation. That's one. Then it must be equality in administration of justice. Again, I've touched on that as well. Every person that the police comes in contact with, regardless of race, creed, color, or sexual origin, must be treated equally. And historically, that has not occurred in the city of Harrisburg or nationally. Of course, the next piece is behavioral and mental health issues must be addressed. And that's on both sides. That means our police officers must be evaluated. They must have access to health care, mental health care in terms of dealing with their aggression, their issues, and the things that they would deal with on a daily, in addition to our community also having access to the proper treatment to be able to deal with behavioral mental health issues. Equity and inclusion, of course, in the workforce. Historically, again, people of our communities, police officers, as well as firefighters, need to be represented and be reflected, of course, of the people that they serve. One of the issues and counter arguments that you'll have is, well, we just can't find people to pass the test. I'll tell you what, many of us on this call right now are educated individuals, but even with our education, many of us had SAT prep courses. I'm a huge advocate of creating a civil service prep course for our residents who are desirous of becoming police officers or firefighters who have historically had difficulty in passing the test. Next one, of course, research-driven practices. As you stated earlier, Lancaster, there are a lot of other cities that are close to us and within our geographic location that we can borrow ideas and concepts, and they've been successful in their jurisdictions, so we also need to use them in ours as well. Public safety at the center is a major, major issue. Our police officers must be reprogrammed to a certain degree to understand that their job and major focus and mission is to serve and protect, not to subjugate and break necks. That is not their role, and that must be made to be clear, and that is from the top to the bottom. Victims' rights must be recognized. We need to stop shaming the victim, which happens oftentimes when police answer a call. The person that's calling oftentimes is viewed as a criminal themselves, and that must stop. And that's something else that must take place within the police department. Education and training is really at the top of the list, not only from a community standpoint, but from a policing standpoint as well. Our officers must be trained on the latest de-escalation techniques, on how to identify a person with a DSM diagnosis, and how to work with this community in such a way that they don't come across as being some paramilitary personnel, that they're actually there to serve our community. Community partnerships, of course, are also at the top, in working with our community groups that can serve as surrogates and liaisons to address these myriad of issues, and of course, leadership and accountability. Many of the issues that we have is a direct result of leadership. It's a top-down approach. If the man at the top is committed, so will the man at the bottom be, and if he's not, he will be removed.
Thank you, Mr. Banks.
And if I could respond to that as well.
Yes.
You heard me outline my day one focus on violent crime with the summit. What happens after that? It starts with leadership in the city, and as Otto said, it starts at the top. And it starts with creating relationships in the community, with the community, and having those folks at the table to help solve, but more importantly, communicating when there are incidents, communicating when there is structure put into place, when there are new procedures put into place, and when you are overhauling a city that is in desperate need of work on community relationships and our systems. I would respectfully disagree that there is community policing right now. If you study the community policing models, the best practices across the country, we're not anywhere near that. And we can immediately look at those models and implement those models and help get this community back to a manageable level with our crime situation, especially our violent crime situation. I mentioned 3 cities that have done it. They came through the pandemic, which with virtually no increase in violent crime. We need to have that as our target, and it's something we can do. Now, on the police reform part and helping our police department change and reformat, we've also got to look at our police numbers. I'm not advocating that we become a city that brings more police into our neighborhoods and that kind of thing. It's about bringing police in who look like our neighborhoods, who park, walk, and talk in our neighborhoods, and have a relationship with those of us in our neighborhoods to know the good and the bad of each of our neighborhoods and help us as partners to change our neighborhoods.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the next topic. Our next person is Maureen Dunbar. Maureen Dunbar is a retired Harrisburg School District teacher. She is originally from Finger Lakes area of New York, but she has lived in Harrisburg for over 30 years. She worked in the school district for 34 years, 29 years as a teacher, 5 years as an instructional coach. Through her experience, she has become very familiar with the plights and successes of the school district. Ms. Dunbar, you may ask your question.
Okay, thank you. If elected, how do you envision your role as mayor in helping bridge the divide between the school district and the city residents? And what plans, if any, do you have for your administration and the Harrisburg School District working together?
Okay, we're going to have Mayor Papenfuse answer first. Ms. Mayor Papenfuse, you may answer.
Okay, thanks for that. I think I'm the only candidate running who's a former public school teacher. When I first moved to the area, I taught 7th and 8th grade. I taught in Central Dauphin because those were the positions that were open at the time. And it was a great experience. I come from a family of teachers. I'm very familiar with the importance of class size, of the importance of building relationships within the public school system. And I think one of the reasons I have supported a lot of teachers is because I've been committed to academic reform in the district for quite some time. One of the reasons I push so hard for receivership, and I think I am the primary reason, if you were to speak to the Department of Education, that the school district is now under state control, is because I wanted to define our issues as academic in nature and not just financial. I pushed very hard for receivership at a time when that was not popular at all in the city of Harrisburg. Nobody wanted to give up that control, but it had to be done. And I think the district is better positioned now under the Wolf administration and with the extra resources that the Department of Education can bring to bear because of the move to receivership than it would have been had we not fought so hard for it, had I not specifically fought so hard for it. That's an example of leadership. I believe in partnerships with the Harrisburg School District. I don't believe in another mayoral takeover or mayoral control of the school district. That did not work in Harrisburg, and it's not something that we want to return to. If you look at some of the partnerships that we've done, even in the past year with the school district, we've been pretty creative. We were the only municipality in Pennsylvania to put lessons on public access television right from the get-go of the pandemic. That was a great partnership. We had the superintendent and teachers on a regular basis, updating the community about device distribution, internet access, and the various things that were going on in the school district. We did a lot of joint programming. And to this day, we've been highlighting a lot of the positive and really exciting things that are going on within the district. We've profiled a lot of teachers in a number of classes, and I continue to do that on a sort of weekly basis with regard to the Facebook Lives and the other things that we're doing. Moving forward, there's lots of room for partnership with the Harrisburg School District. Some of the things that are most important that we get right have to do with the former high school, William Penn, which is owned by the school district, and which needs to be, which will be sold by the school district. They've made that very clear, but which could become something great for the community, or if not carefully monitored, might become something which isn't a benefit for the community. And that's a role for the city to play with the school district, because although the school district controls the sale, the city will control the land development process and will ultimately be able to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Yeah, one last thing I would just say, we have an underperforming charter school in the city of Harrisburg. It's premier. It needs to be shut down. And I will continue to put pressure on the school district to do that. And I think we need to get those kids back in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Papenfuse.
Mr. Schankweiler, you may respond to the question.
Thank you, and thanks, Maureen, for your question. This is the number 3 issue I hear at the doors every night and on the weekends. And I have met numerous parents who stand on their front porch and in tears tell me their nervousness about their children. They can't move out of the city. What are their options? What am I going to do? And we talk about that. Now, as you know, the mayor has no control over the schools, but what the mayor can do is several things. First of all, we need to make sure that our children going to and from school have a safe environment, a clean environment, that they're not being made to walk through neighborhoods that are unsafe for them. That's the first thing we could do. The second thing that a mayor needs to do and should do is have a relationship with the school district and be at the table, knowing what the school district is doing, making sure that there is a faster improvement to our schools, because our students can't wait for years, because then we'll have lost a generation. We need to be making those improvements much quicker. And then I think a mayor needs to be there to give ideas from other urban areas as far as what's working around this country, best practices, like in Milwaukee and like some other towns where we can bring those ideas here and put them into play. The number one reason people leave our city is because of our school district. And we've got to fix that. We've got to have a strong option for those families, and we've got to retain a middle class of families in the city. My experience in education is I was at the beginning of starting SciTech High and getting that school built and operational and putting their programs in place. I was at the beginning of starting Harrisburg University, a school that started in the early 2000s in the city. We now have 7,000 students. 63% of them are students of color, and most of them are first generation students who've never had the opportunity or thought they had the opportunity to go to college. I've got experience in growing education. I take that same experience to do that in our school district with the administration there. I'll say one more thing. You know, we talk a lot about the bad of our school district, but there are a lot of amazing students we have coming out of Harrisburg School District. And I met a teacher the other night. She happens to be a coach and a teacher. She told me about a student we have who is a sophomore that already has 5 Ivy League offers for college. Why aren't we talking about the good that is coming out of our school as well, instead of always talking about the bad? We need to do that because there's good coming out of our school. Yes, we have issues. Yes, we've got to fix them. We've got to do it in a fairly rapid way so that we don't lose the current students that we have. But let's give the district as much kudos as we can, as well as working on those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schankweiler. Mr. Banks, you may answer.
Yes, there is a lot of good coming out of Harrisburg because I was born and raised here and educated in the city as well. And with regard to Mayor Papenfuse, I clearly understand why you were removed from being a teacher, because obviously you didn't have a plan then and you don't have one now. However, I do have a plan for the Harrisburg School District and how the city of Harrisburg can engage the district. And the way I'll explain my plan is to focus on a young man that we'll just call Johnny for the sake of this discussion. Johnny goes to school. Johnny is disruptive, and oftentimes Johnny is violent towards other students. Everyone in the school thinks that Johnny's a bad child. However, Johnny isn't. It's because of the environment from which Johnny comes. Johnny comes from a household where there might be one parent, and that one parent in that household may have a drug and alcohol issue. So in order to really change the trajectory of Johnny and ensure that he's successful, you have to focus on the whole family. So what I've done is already formed a partnership with HAC, and as well as Dauphin County, which more specific is Dauphin County Commissioner George Hartwick. And what they've already guaranteed to me is that they're going to make sure that in 3 schools that we're going to not only have social service case managers, but we're also going to have enrollment specialists from HAC. So what happens is when Johnny goes to school and he makes the left to go in the classroom, his mother and or whomever his caregiver is can make the right. And they'll be able to go into that office and receive the quality social services that they need to address the issues that are in their household. And not only that, they'll also be able to get help on the FAFSA form and enroll in HACS programs and get the job training and readiness that they need. So now let's focus on Johnny. Johnny's one of his major issues is that he goes home with homework, but there's no one there that can help him because there are deficits in his household. So what happens? Now we're going to extend the school day and turn our schools in the evening to community centers. Many of our parents, especially our single working mothers, have difficulty with after school care and child care because they're just really trying to make ends meet as is. So now what we're going to have is quality after school program in a safe, secure environment. Ladies and gentlemen, after all, we own these schools, we're paying taxes, and they're being heated in the winter, cooled in the summer. They have kitchens. They also have classrooms in addition to stages where many of these children can learn the arts and quality programming. However, I'm also going to make sure that those students receive the quality programming from our community organizations who are already doing it as is. The question now remains, how do we pay for it? The way we pay for it is through 3 streams of revenue. One, of course, will come from Title I money. Everybody knows that we receive Title I money because many of our students are either on or below the poverty level, and Title I money is not infinite, it's finite. So therefore, we have to partner with other resources. As your mayor, I'm going to use a portion of community development block grant money. So therefore, now what we have is an expanded base of revenues. I'm also going to use a pre-existing school choice program, which is called EITC, that is currently being utilized to fund the SBI program, where corporations can donate up to $1 million to nonprofit organizations and receive a 90% deduction against their state tax liability. So what we have now is 3 streams of revenue that are budget neutral, that won't cause your taxes to be increased, but we'll be able to pay for the program to not only address the issues of Johnny's parents, Johnny, but also providing opportunities for income generation for our residents who are already doing a good work in our community. That is my plan for the city of Harrisburg School District, and that is how a mayor should work with the city and this community.
Thank you, Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Again, you can choose to or not to answer the question. The question is, according to Robert Marzano and other researchers, children in impoverished environments hear far less vocabulary than their counterparts in affluent neighborhoods. This contributes to the education gap and the literacy gap that we observe in later years. Is there anything that you can do to make sure that children at the ages of 2 and 3 are hearing more vocabulary and promoting reading in the home, or anything that you have as far as establishing early childhood development programs and education? I see Mr. Schankweiler's hands up. I'm going to give him an opportunity to answer.
Yes, thank you. Good follow-up question. We have a very good net of nonprofit organizations in this community who are dealing with this very issue as far as school readiness and helping our young children read and be ready for school. One of the things that is difficult is with so many organizations focused on that, we've got duplication of effort. I think that's where a mayor could come in and work with all those programs to say, you know, where is the need, who can cover that need, and then what is the plan? And of course, work with the district on that as well. I'm a longtime United Way volunteer. We re-engineered that organization to help move the needle on many community indicators. One of those is school readiness and school graduation. We put a program in, and we've got the pilot program running in several of our schools here in the city as far as family liaison coordinators. It's already in place, and the United Way is paying for these folks to be in place, and they are community aides, community consultants who work directly with the family on issues in the household to help the student do better and do more in school. It's a program that will be expanded into all our schools, and it's one that's already happening in partnership with the school district. And we're seeing good results as far as our young people being ready for school and doing better in school.
Thank you. I'm going to allow Mr. Banks to answer next.
Sorry.
All right. Yes. Well, currently in our city, again, I'll just restate a portion of my education plan, utilizing pre-existing entities and resources that are currently providing those services in our community. Right now, we have a gentleman by the name of Mr. Floyd Stokes from Super Reader. I don't know anyone who has a better program or concept than Floyd inside this city. And I'd be the first to tell you that I'd stand beside him, you know, and champion his cause and champion what he's been doing and help promote that as well. So my major focus of my administration is to use the talent here, provide the necessary resources, build upon it, and let's grow a great Harrisburg.
I'll jump in too and just say that I've dedicated my whole adult life to trying to improve literacy, to focus on the importance of books and reading and education. I've created a space in the community where people can come together that highlights authors, that supports people like Floyd and his efforts. That's what we've done. And I have to say, Otto is not being honest with everyone about the sources of his funding for his campaign. He's taken tens of thousands of dollars, $75,000 from Republican organizations and Republican billionaires that are interested in defunding the Harrisburg School District, not adding more resources, but seeing more students walk away. I told you how we could get more students back in the school district by closing an underperforming charter school in Premier. But we also have to do things like push for a new funding formula, a fair funding formula for our public school system. This is another place where a mayor can advocate and lead. And that's something that we need to see happen. It will only happen if we have a Democratic majority, not a Republican majority on the Hill. But it's something which would fund districts not based on the wealth of the communities, not based on the amount of property taxes which the community can raise, but rather based on a formula which is fair and based on the need of the community and is statewide. These are the things that I believe in. These are the things that the Republican backers of folks like Otto do not believe in and are actively supporting his campaign to try and prevent.
Mr. Banks, I see that you have your hand up. I'm going to allow you to respond.
Yes, Mr. Papenfuse, actually Eric is misdirecting and misleading this entire body. Eric, clearly, all you have to do is look at his fundraising reports, and he has more Republican donors than Dave or I. So it's disingenuous for him to say that, but that also explains the reason why he was relieved of his position as a teacher at Central Dauphin, because he does have a difficulty in presenting the truth and the facts.
I'll just say I don't understand this relieved of my position. I wasn't relieved of my position at Central Dauphin, but we'll leave it at that. I chose to move on and open a bookstore and dedicate my life to literacy, education, books, and reading.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move on to the next topic. We have Mr. Parsons. Mr. Ron Parsons has lived in Harrisburg since 1977. He is a father and a grandfather. He is also a prevention intervention specialist for Breaking the Chains, a suicide prevention at Gatekeeper, and is currently in school to become a life coach. His goal is to make a difference in the community and support any individuals or organizations that try to achieve the same goal. Mr. Parsons, you can ask your question now. Unmute his mic, please.
It should pop up asking you to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My question is, historically, the statistics have shown that the Black and minority communities have been subject to heavy policing and harsher sentences due to systemic racism in the legal system. In light of this revelation, if elected, what are your plans to assist men, women, and children of color whose lives have been disrupted and destroyed by over-incarceration in order to reduce recidivism?
Mr. Schankweiler, you can answer first.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you for your commitment with your life's work. I just want to say that, in our city, systemic racism exists in Harrisburg. We need to change, reform, and update systems, procedures, and process in City Hall. It starts there, and we need to be a leader in that. Now, let's just talk about many of the families and individuals I've met at the doors. I've heard the stories and heard their situations. And I've talked to the social service agencies that work on these issues in our community. And our social service agencies here who handle the bulk of the work are maxed out, not only from our city population, but unfortunately, our surrounding communities feel the need to send all their folks to the city for service and from these nonprofits. So the question is, how do we alleviate that maxed out feeling? How do we deliver more services? Well, the first thing you need to do, and I would do as mayor, is to gather those social service agencies together, those governmental agencies, and let's look at exactly what programs are being offered, where are we unable to treat and help more individuals and families, where are the gaps, where are the duplications of services, where are the lack of services, and then let's streamline that so that we know that we've got that population covered. We've also got to look at communication of the services that are available in the city. Nowhere can you go to find, where do I go for help? And we need that. If you look at our housing units that for those coming out of prison, no availability, and that's difficult. And then we need to look at our housing, beyond housing, we need to look at our job programs. I met a young man at the door who told me his story, 17 years old. He was arrested on a drug charge, put away in jail for 10 years. First of all, far too much on receiving 10 years for that sentence, but that's a whole nother subject. He told me about his struggle to get a job, and he worked for years. He finally got his CDL license and has an excellent job with a major transportation company. But we talked about the issues that he saw while he was in jail, the issues of others who were offenders and have come out, and the struggles they have to get a job and to have a family sustaining wage that they can support their family. That's the major piece we need to work on. Helping those who come out, who are ready to be in the workforce, who are ready to be a supporter of their family. We need to make that path easier. We need to make that path something that is available to everyone. And we need to do that for those in the city, because that will help us in a very large way.
Thank you, Mr. Schankweiler. Mr. Banks.
Okay, here we go. Yes, what I'm going to do is elevate the Office of Social Equity and Affirmative Action. This issue that Mr. Parsons touched on really is systemic in nature. It is how we treat returning citizens. We treat them as if whatever their infraction was, we treat it as if it's a life sentence. That means when they go apply for a position, as soon as they check the box that says that I was indicted and or arrested and received M3 or a felony conviction, that it's as if they're supposed to live under that scarlet letter the rest of their lives. And I don't believe that. And under my administration, as long as you've not committed a crime that is egregious in nature against a child, you will be given an opportunity. As long as you've not committed a crime that is egregious behavior against a woman, you will be given and granted an opportunity. It starts at the top, ladies and gentlemen. If you really are committed to changing the trajectory of our community, It must start from the very top. We must have policies in place that are designed in such a way to protect each and every one of us, and also to ensure that we're given equal opportunities and protections under the law. And I'll give you an example of exactly what I'm talking about. I have a friend that is the secretary here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. When he obtained that position, I said to him, what are you going to do to ensure that you have more people of color, meaning Black and Latinos, in your department? He said, I don't know. He said, but I know I need to do something, Otto. What are your thoughts? I said, look at when you put out a job notice. Look at your job notice and tell me what your job notice says. So in time, he reviewed the job notice, and it required that they have 1 year experience working in that department. Bear in mind, how are you going to get a job in that department if you're not even given that year experience? It's impossible. So when he eliminated that 1 year experience caveat, now he has more people of color in that department than historically they've ever had. It is that same strategy that I'm going to employ when it comes to returning citizens. We must stop this. We are the ones that are creating the recidivism. Once they go in, they do their time. They pay their debt back to society. They need to be given an opportunity to come back and be able to support themselves and not only their families. We take their driver's licenses, and that's an economic development tool. That's something else we must deal with and address. We must give them an opportunity to be able to be mobile so they can get to the jobs that they qualify for. And sadly to say, many of those jobs are on the West Shore in their second and third shifts in these warehouses. So that's something else that we need to do and address to eliminate this recidivism and this scourge that continues to plague our community. We need opportunities, and we need them now.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Mayor Papenfuse, you may respond.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, I'm proud of the diversity that we have in City Hall at the moment. My business administrator, chief of staff, African-American, chief of police, African-American, HR director, African-American, public works director, African-American, building housing director, African-American. And we've already banned the box in Harrisburg. So Otto, there's no need to say you're going to do it. It's already been done. We don't hold felonies against folks when they want to come apply for a job. In fact, I was just in Harrisburg knocking on doors the other day, and I spoke to a woman who didn't realize that because she had a past felony drug conviction, that she could apply to be a sanitation driver for public works. I made her the contact. I help her get the application into HR, and we hire folks like that with those backgrounds all the time. We lead by example in terms of our hiring practices at the city. Another program which sort of speaks to this issue that we have is our partnership with the county for the co-responder program, which is an effort to not have individuals go into the criminal justice system to begin with, when they maybe have substance abuse problems or mental health problems. The goal is to have social workers respond and not have that negative interaction with the criminal justice system. But the real way I intend to deal with this issue of systemic racism and the systemic poverty, which is tied to it, which is the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow and redlining, and very much does affect us in Harrisburg, has to do with my plans for a universal basic income. And we're going to use the resources that are going to be coming to us from the Biden administration, American Rescue Plan, to create a UBI program here in Harrisburg, which is going to list thousands of families out of poverty. Consider it a form of reparations, because most of those families are African American. And we can do that in a way which is sustainable grants to families over the course of multiple years, 2 years, maybe $1,000 a month up to. And this is going to be transformative for Harrisburg. It's an incredible opportunity. Those funds are coming in the next 30 days. This is why, in part, elections matter, and why getting the Biden administration in there and a Democratic majority is going to allow us on a municipal level, on a city level, to correct the legacy of systemic racism in a major way.
Thank you. I see Mr. Banks has his hand up. I'm going to allow him a minute to respond.
Yes, I will give Mayor Papenfuse credit on the fact that, yes, he did meet a young woman uptown. He did give her a job application, but what he left out was the fact that he offered her a job for his vote. because I got that same call that said, Eric Papenfuse was up here, and Mr. Banks, I got to remove your sign because he's going to give me a job. So Eric, yes, you are correct. And you did provide somebody a job who in exchange for a vote. Thank you.
What a ridiculously unsubstantive response. What I did was I helped a constituent apply for a job at the city who didn't know that they could because they had a felony conviction. I didn't do that because I wanted that person's vote or needed that person's vote. I did it because it was the right thing to do. And I just talked about a generationally transformative program, universal basic income, that can lift thousands of Harrisburg families out of poverty. And the best you could do was take a cheap political shot.
Mr. Schankweiler, I saw that your hand was up. Did you want to respond at all?
Yes, let's get back to the issues. So one of the things that under the time consideration we couldn't talk about is the jobs piece. And if you look at my agenda on my website, I talk a lot about jobs in the city. We need a trade center. We need to teach our young people. We need to teach those who are looking for a new skill. And we can do that through a public-private partnership with the businesses that are in the city and around the city who are desperate for tradespeople, for IT people, and that type of thing. The funding for that job center would come from those businesses, and we can get our young people coming out of school into jobs like electrician, HVAC, plumbers, which are starting salaries of $70,000 and $80,000. That's what we need to do. We don't need to look at dollars for individuals. We need to look at jobs for individuals and show people a path to a family sustaining wage in the city. And that will be a major focus for me when I am mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the follow-up question now. In 2001, Justice Policy Institute examined incarceration, and it was found that Pennsylvania had the highest rates of incarceration of Blacks. So assuming that Harrisburg follows the state trend, what will you do to address those concerns with local prosecutors and judges, as well as fix the aftermath of that in our community? I see Mr. Banks' hand up. I'm going to allow him to respond.
Well, one of the biggest things that we have at our disposal is the utilization, again, of our pre-existing resources and entities that currently service our community. There are, a person can get ARD. And the thing is, that's alternative rehabilitative disposition. One of the biggest things that I could do as mayor is serve as a champion and go and speak on behalf of people who need that additional support and community support to be able to make that transition. We have to stop using a heavy-handed approach when it comes to policing in the judicial system. It's not working. All it's doing is creating job opportunities for people who live in rural areas. Why don't we give those same people an opportunity to be trained? And as long as they're fully engaged in a training program, and then we need to make sure that jobs are available at the end to prevent the recidivism. So I'm going to be a huge advocate for our returning citizens and people that are even looking for the possibility of being incarcerated. There needs to be someone to stand in the middle and say, look, this old way of doing things is not working. We need to create new strategies, and those new strategies need to be implemented so we can build a more stronger, vibrant, and productive community.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Mr. Schankweiler, I saw your hand up. Would you like to respond to that question?
Yes, thank you. Just one quick comment. This gets back to relationship development by a mayor and leadership. We have programs in our city that are already dealing with these issues. There's no reason for City Hall to duplicate and create something else to muddy the system. Let's look at those programs we already have, and then let's boost those programs to help solve these issues in our community. Let's take the best ones we have in the city and let's stand behind them. And then as mayor, champion those and use the relationship of the mayor's office to work with police, to work with prosecutors, to work with the judicial system to get those things in place.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next topic now. The next representative is Lene Harris. She is a Harrisburg native. She is also a Harrisburg school district and the mother of two beautiful children. She is one of the first Black owners of a beauty supply, L&L Beauty Supply store in Harrisburg. She also is co-owner and co-founder of Buy the Block Back LLC, which is an investment company that invests in local real estate in the community and rehabs that so that she can house the individuals of our community. Lene? You may ask your question. Is she still with us? I'm sorry.
She's with us. She's not, I need her to accept the unmute.
Okay.
Okay, there it is. Lene, can you hear us?
I can't hear.
I see her mic is unmuted. Can you hear us now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, do you want to go ahead and pin her video? All right, you may ask your question now. We just read your bio.
Okay, I'm sorry, 1 second. I have to pull them up. Okay, what plans do you have to improve rundown abandoned homes in the city? And is that an area of importance, or would you rather build more commercial spaces to improve the economy? If not, what programs do you plan on establishing to help new home buyers renovate these abandoned properties?
Mr. Banks, you can answer first.
Okay, the first one on the housing side, I plan to create more quality and affordable housing options by assisting developers with low-income housing tax credits, utilizing redevelopment assistance CAP, which is our CAP money, community development block grant funds, and home investment partnership funds and other programs that have been at our disposal. But one of the biggest issues that's really been plaguing our community and the housing market, besides access to quality and affordable, is the issue of absentee landlords. There's not one candidate for mayor that has a foolproof strategy on how to address that other than myself. The way that you address these absent landlord issues is I'm going to create an ordinance that requires a minimum maintenance standard for rental properties that is consistent with HUD-funded residential requirements. This ordinance will have a police power mechanism that will put a lien on the property that will cover the cost of maintenance and administrative overhead. We will use city contractors to do the work. So what I'm doing is essentially utilizing our police power to put a lien on the property. So when, for example, one of the individuals on this call, say that you have an absentee landlord or slumlord, they're not doing anything to repair the property. We, of course, will use our police power to put a lien on the property. We're going to do the work. We're going to get it done. We're going to take care of it for the renter. But then what we're ultimately going to do is then use local contractors to actually do the work. So we're putting our people to work to fix and rebuild our entire community. And then in the event that the landlord doesn't pay off the lien, guess who owns the property? The city. And what can we do with that property then? We can put it back out there in the community to be resold, or the person that's residing in the property, we can even create some sort of specialized program where they can rent to own and then become a homeowner themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Mayor Papenfuse, you may answer.
Yeah, Otto, I don't think that program would be legal. You can't just go into somebody's property and fix it up and send them the bill. What you can do is you can lien properties. We do that. We do that regularly in the city of Harrisburg, and those liens can get discharged at the time a property can sell. You can also shut down a property or close a property as unfit for human habitation because it's not up to certain standards. But you can't just force somebody to do something the way you want it done. That's not something that's acceptable under current law. I'll tell you some things which do work and which we are doing that really get to the heart of this question about buying back the block and what we can do to incentivize folks who want to renovate properties in the city of Harrisburg. Some examples of things that do work are what the Dauphin County Votech is currently doing on Wiconisco Street in Harrisburg. They're using a class of Votech students to renovate what was owned, a city property that was owned by the Redevelopment Authority. They're fixing up, they're using as part of their instructional mandate, and that's something which is going to be a benefit for the community, something I support, those types of partnerships with the schools. Number two, we can support organizations like TLC, which is based in the hub in Uptown Harrisburg, which is also doing just that. I was at a site that they have up on Dairy where they're actually using ex-offenders in a way to help train them to learn the construction trades by fixing up blighted and abandoned properties. And that's something that we support with some of the dollars that Otto mentioned. In addition, I think people should know this. We did pass, from a policy standpoint, a very progressive tax abatement ordinance, the first of its kind in the city of Harrisburg. And it basically says that if you do buy a property, and listen, there are hundreds of properties that are currently available for $100 or, essentially nothing on the county's repository list. They need a lot of work. That's why nobody owns them. But if you buy them and you fix them up, we're not going to tax you on those improvements. You get a full 10-year, 100% tax abatement. So let's say the property is only worth a couple $100. You're not paying any enormous school tax. You're not paying any enormous property taxes. And as a result, you can put $10, $20, $30, $40, $50, $60,000 into fixing up the property without having any negative tax ramifications for yourself. That's a real incentive. And ultimately, what we need to have happen is we need to see a raising across the board of home values and home prices in the city. And that's what you're seeing, because one of the things which holds us back is it doesn't make financial sense for banks or investors or anybody who wants to fix up a home to spend $80,000 fixing up a home or $100,000 if the home isn't going to be worth that at the end of the day. And as I say, we're starting to see that dynamic change. That's a very positive and encouraging stat for the city of Harrisburg. And it's something that, coupled with the tax abatement, I think is going to make it much more attractive for the rehab and the renovation of many of these neglected homes in the city.
Thank you, Mayor Papenfuse.
Mr. Schankweiler, you may answer.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to my interaction with folks on their porches. Here's what happens to me a good number of times every day. I go to a homeowner and they'll say to me, we'll start talking about the city, and they'll take me on a tour of their neighborhood. And they'll show me the house that is dilapidated and they've called the city for years and gotten no response. They'll show me a house where they pretty much are sure there are drug dealers living in the house. Or they'll show me a house that is an illegal boarding home that is generating a lot of the trash that is ruining their neighborhood. We have a crisis. We can't depend on the county. We can't depend on anybody else, but we've got to take care of it ourselves. So I will create a mayor's commission on affordable housing and home ownership. Key word there is home ownership. 27% of our housing stock in the city is owner occupied. We need to increase home ownership in the city, and we need to do that with residents that are here, that are renting in some of these less than stellar rental units, and get them on a path to home ownership. We can do that. We need to provide mortgage money and a fund to borrow from for residents who can't get a standard mortgage at a bank, but they have good credit. We need to do that. We need programs in that from that commission that to set up to help seniors who may not have the money to fix their homes up, but we can help them do that. Again, our neighborhoods are in crisis. The city is sitting on 5,000 lots right now. We need an entrepreneurial attitude in our housing system in the city to utilize those lots for residents in the city. We need to be taking down these blighted buildings because for all sorts of reasons, crime, trash, that type of thing. And we need a plan. It's all about having a vision, a plan, and executing that and holding people accountable to do that. And we've not got that in the city. Let me tell you about one other idea. I would break the city into districts, and each of those districts, I would assign a planning person, a codes person, a safety person, and a health person. And I would target them and say, look, you need to work with the residents in that district, in that part of town. You need to work with them to come up with a viable plan for that part of the city to address blight, trash, abandoned properties, and to also address not only the challenges and issues, but address the opportunities in that neighborhood, like affordable housing, like amenities that neighborhood needs, like our food deserts and that kind of thing. Those districts would then take the responsibility from looking at the city as a whole and breaking it down to a much smaller unit to have a plan for each section of our towns to deal with the challenges, issues, and opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. I see that you have your hand raised. I want to allow you to respond.
Yes. First to Dave. Dave, this current mayor already broken our city apart, and that is our job to try to repair it, because obviously it is a tale of two cities. One, of course, which is the mayor of Midtown, and one, of course, which is the rest of the city of Harrisburg. Now, with regard to Mr. Papenfuse's statement about my ordinance being illegal, it is an ordinance, Mr. Papenfuse. If you had background like I do as a former U.S. Undersecretary at the U.S. Department of Housing Urban Development, who is specialized in this, I'll be the first to tell you that there is precedent. It has been done, can be done, and it will be done by me, regardless of what you're selling to this community. Please, Mr. Papenfuse, stick to the facts and stick to what you know, which is selling books.
Okay, I'm going to ask the follow-up question. Nationally, home ownership rates are at 65%. In Harrisburg, home ownership rates are at 35%. Now, some economists would argue that very high home ownership rates don't always equal a good economy. So what will you do as mayor if elected to balance a good economy with those people who want to attain the American dream and buy a home? Mr. Schankweiler.
Thank you. I touched upon that in my answer before, is setting up programs for individuals that can't get traditional banking products to be able to purchase a home. I think there's a more important piece in just not buying a home. And the Fair Housing Council in our city has a program they do where they help individuals who are interested in buying a home. But it's not just, again, about buying the home. It's about what does it take to own a home? What does it take to maintain a home? And what are those things you need to know about doing that so you have longevity and you continue to own that home? And then at the end of the program, they give you money toward a small down payment. We need to make that program even bigger for our city, make others aware of it. I think what the city also needs to do is, what is the vision? The vision is we need a safe, clean, beautiful city. If the city can deliver that, which we're currently not delivering that, if we can deliver that, then all these other components like housing, like economic development, they will happen in all 22 of our neighborhoods. And that's the focus. Get it out of downtown and midtown, and let's do it in other neighborhoods as well. Follow that model that happened there. What is important is bringing back city assets like those 5,000 lots. What can we do with our residents, and what can we do to attract others? One last piece, gentrification is a big thing in our city that we need to talk about and plan. There's a program in Atlanta where they took a very old, very dilapidated neighborhood in the area, and they used a program called gentrification with social justice. They were able to rejuvenate a neighborhood, keeping the residents that were there in their homes, but also helping them fix up their homes. And now they are proud, and crime has dropped, trash and blight has dropped tremendously in that city. That's a program we could bring here for some of our 22 neighborhoods.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next topic. I'm going to ask this question because Annie's not able to be here with us today. She had a family emergency. I do want to read her bio because I feel like it will be you guys will be touched by it. Annie is a nurse, an entrepreneur, and devoted mother. She's originally from Stilton, but she lives in Harrisburg now. During the pandemic, she quit her job and relocated to New York to assist working with COVID patients in their hospitals. Afterwards, she relocated to Florida, where she did the same thing, worked in hospitals that were overburdened with COVID patients. So to say the least, Annie is a modern day hero. She's a devoted healthcare worker with a huge heart and a compassion for caring for people. And Annie's question was, Annie's question, it was, President Biden said that by April 19th, every adult in the country will be eligible to receive the COVID vaccination. If elected, what are you going to do to promote trust in communities who have shown distrust in the COVID vaccination, such as the Black community or Trump loyalists? And Mr. Papenfuse, you may answer first.
Okay, thank you. I think this is an important question. First of all, one of the things that we are currently doing is that we are bringing the vaccine to people where they are in their neighborhoods. There was just a vaccine clinic on 14th Street that LHAC sponsored on Thursday. There's going to be another clinic at the Hadi Mosque in Uptown on Monday. These are hundreds of people that are able to get the vaccine without having to travel. If you do have a vehicle and you can travel, the city has also established a vaccine clinic at HAC. Our fire department is basically in charge of the logistics of that clinic, and we can get 1,000 people in and out of there a day. You don't have to leave your car. You can just go through and you can get vaccinated. We did something extraordinary in Harrisburg that has not received much discussion, and I'm curious what the other candidates, how they feel about this. But I made the executive decision to require the vaccine among city employees. Why? Because they interact with the public every day, and it's not just about the individuals; it's about their families, it's about the people, it's about the public. And two, because if we hadn't done that, we were looking at an internal voluntary rate among first responders of less than 50%. And we're the only municipality that I know of in Pennsylvania that stood up and said, we're going to make this a requirement, just like they do in the military. I think employers may need to look to that as we move forward, especially as we reach the point where there now is plenty of vaccine, but not enough demand, a sort of reversal of where we are. So that's our response. We lead by example in the city, and I've required it. And I wonder if my opponents would agree with that.
Thank you, Mayor Papenfuse. I'm sorry, I wanted to update the question. You already touched on it, but she also asked, like, what would you do for people who don't have access to the vaccination due to transportation or medical concerns and are restricted to their homes? So that in addition to building the trust in communities such as the Black community and Trump loyalists. And you touched on it, Mr. Papenfuse, but if you would
yes,
like
I tried to answer that. I think okay.
You did. If you did want the opportunity, I would allow that. Mr. Schankweiler, you can answer next.
Thank you. And I know Annie wasn't able to be with us, but she should be applauded by all of us for what she did. Having a daughter who is a nurse and was on the front line with COVID, I understand what she did, and that was a huge sacrifice on her part. So please pass along our thank you for what she did. You know, I want to take a step back a minute. If I were the mayor in office over the last 2 years, I would have had something in place that would have really addressed our pandemic needs in this city. I would have already had in place an emergency management team. You know, before this administration, there was a strong team in place that could be called on in a moment's notice to handle emergencies in our city. Emergencies like floods, major snowstorms, and then of course, how to deal with something that popped up overnight, like the COVID situation. When I'm mayor, I'm going to bring back that emergency management team and make sure they are fully in place and fully aware. I've talked to a number of folks in the city and those in the surrounding community who used to be a part of that management team, and we've got nothing like that. I'd put in place representatives from all departments in the city. I'd call together external departments like River Rescue, our hospitals, and other government entities to make sure that we have in place and are always updating and making sure we have the professionals in place that when we have an emergency, we can deal with that emergency. We should have had testing sites in the city. We should have had vaccine sites. But the most important thing we needed was to make sure we had plans in place to deal with quality of life issues with our citizens. And then the biggest thing that was lacking is communications. We need to have communications so that when we do have an emergency, every citizen knows where to go. We post that information or we promote that information that they know exactly what they can do and who they can depend on in the city to help them through that emergency. It wasn't there, and that's what I hear from people at the doors all the time. We don't know what was going on. We don't know what was available. Under my administration, that emergency management team would be in place to make sure that all our citizens are aware of what needs to happen, what will happen, and what they can count on and trust from city government.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. You may respond.
Yes, and actually just to piggyback a little on what Dave said, that yes, I was a member of that emergency management team that he's talking about, because I have participated here in the city of Harrisburg with the former administration. I also am the only one that has deep experience in working in disaster situations, of course, being the former undersecretary at HUD, where I work closely with FEMA on the rebuilding efforts of our Gulf Coast of our nation. But what I would do specifically in Harrisburg, what needs to be done yesterday, is not only increased investment, but expansion of our Department of Health. There are four major areas that I believe need to be addressed within that Department of Health. And one, of course, is just access in general. That primary care clinics need to be built in areas in which underserved communities reside. That's number one. The hours of operation should be more flexible in order to serve those who work off shifts. That's a problem. Many of our people that need these type of services may work in a warehouse second or third shifts. And by the time they get off, they don't have the access or vice versa. We also need childcare services. I know I've said this many times that we need to focus on the women in our community, but they're usually the single heads of households and they need the most help and support. So we need to make sure that childcare services are available in order to accommodate those who would otherwise not be able to seek medical attention due to childcare issues. And of course, you raised the issue yourself when you talk about transportation. Transportation is key because those services are necessary for those who cannot get to the clinic. The second area that I discussed, of course, is health education, and that needs to take place, and that ties directly into your direct question on what can we do in terms of advising our community to get the COVID-19 inoculations that they need. So counseling services need to be made available to educate the community. We need to have education programs regarding the importance of health maintenance. Also regarding proper use of medication is a key issue. Many of our seniors are only taking a portion of their medication because it's so expensive and they're not taking it correctly, and which results in them having increased medical issues. The next, of course, is counseling regarding preventive medicine and ensuring follow-ups. The third area, of course, is affordable medication. When you have a Department of Health, you can assist in negotiating better access to prescription plans. We also need to educate many of our doctors, because the doctors need to prescribe, need to have better prescribing practices that consider the financial burden that prevent people from taking medications as prescribed. And of course, lifestyle modification changes, which are extremely important, that our health department needs to be actively engaged in regarding how to putting out information on following a healthy diet, the importance of exercise and group personal fitness resources, as well as access to healthy foods, providing affordable groceries and education regarding meal preparations. Another big issue that must take place in our community, which our Department of Health can do. And last but not least is, believe it or not, the Department of Health can play a role in the placement of grocery stores in locations in underserved communities as well.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. The follow-up question is statistics are showing that the pandemic is disproportionately affecting women, which I believe some of you've already touched on, but women make up 70% of health services, which the burden was pandemic was pretty much laid in their laps or at their feet. You also have women who domestic violence statistics have been on an uptick due to everyone being confined to their home. As you stated, women are heading to households. A lot of them have lost their jobs, so they're forced to reckon with how they're going to find food for their families or even educate their children because children have been doing all remote access at home for the majority of the year. Are there any plans to help those communities, such as women that have been affected disproportionately by the pandemic?
Yeah, I'll jump in with that one and say the answer to that is the UBI, which I've been talking about, and which none of my opponents are also talking about. They should, because we're talking about supporting households, and we're talking about supporting families with children, in which in many cases women are the primary caregivers, and they would benefit the most from this additional supplemental income. I just have to respond, though, to Dave, because it doesn't come as a surprise to me that he doesn't know what he's talking about, because he has spent very little time, over the past generation being involved in anything political at the city. And when he had a chance to actually serve the city as a member of the ICA, he quit for personal gain and personal ambition to run for mayor before actually getting a chance to learn about the city. But of course, we have an emergency response team at the city. It's basically just fear mongering to suggest that we don't. It's headed by Brian Enterline, who's our fire chief. It is ready at a regular notice, and it is documented and certified by PEMA on a yearly basis. We participate in drills. We participate in all sorts of things. We're absolutely ready for a flood. We're ready for any type of a disaster. You've seen it mobilize at various times, such as our swift response to the South 14th Street sinkhole. And I think our COVID record is stronger than virtually anywhere else in Pennsylvania. We got money out to businesses before anyone else. We've had an eviction moratorium, which is the model really for the country, which has brought evictions to a halt and helped keep people in their homes. We've provided rental relief, and we've done all sorts of things to help folks in the midst of a health emergency. Our record's very strong, and to suggest that we don't have an emergency response team is really nothing but uninformed fear mongering.
Thank you. I'm going to allow Mr. Banks to respond.
Again, Eric, of course, is always misdirecting and misleading this community into something that is completely false. When making a blatant statement that no one else is talking about utilizing the resources for the community, for the families, all you have to do is look at the Channel 27 debate. I made it perfectly clear. And I'm going door to door and made it perfectly clear. What I'm going to do is make sure that every head of household receives a bare minimum of $500 to $1,000 off the top before we even decide how we're going to utilize the rest of the money. Many of our families in these households are ran by single women. And when I knock on these doors and I see these children and I'm talking to these mothers, they're at their wits' end and they need help. I know Eric and some others may not believe that that's going to have a dent, but I'll tell you what, when you're behind on your bills and you're having a difficult time putting food on your table, that $500 or $1,000 is going a long way to buy you the amount of time that you need in order for you to get back on your feet. That just shows how out of touch that he actually is with this community. I'm telling you, our community needs something better. They need something more, and they don't need another 4 years of Eric Papenfuse.
Thank you. Mr. Schankweiler, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I want to get back to the question that was asked, but just real quick on the emergency management team that's not in place. Having talked to those members, I would just encourage the community to do a fact check on that and look into that. So back to the issue as far as helping women in our community who, because of the pandemic and because of issues in our communities, they need help. Again, it's a communication thing. We've got some excellent programs in the city. We've got Hamilton Health Center, which if it started as a tiny little clinic, now it is a major employer, a major place to go for services on health, dental, that type of thing on 17th Street. We have a church run by Reverend Stockstill who has a dental clinic, a health clinic in that. There are places to go, but the city needs to be utilizing new and improved communication tools to let our residents know what is available to them. We've got UPMC in this city, a major health network. It is available for our residents. Get that information out there. Communicate and lead for the benefit of everyone in our 22 neighborhoods.
Thank you. Those are all the questions we have, but we have some requests from participants and they would like to know if it's okay if they ask their questions. Are you guys okay with that? Okay, if you would like to ask any of the candidates a question, you can raise your hand and Elisa will unmute your mic.
All right, first up, we have Andrea Bland.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to ask my question. Okay, so my question is for Mayor Papenfuse. I heard you say that if you didn't make it a policy that all employees of Harrisburg were required to have a vaccine, that one section of the employment would only have, I think you said 20% voluntary rate. Is that correct? Well, my question is, how can you justify forcing women, mostly, who are the main supporters of their home, into having a vaccine when apparently they don't want it? That just seems to go against what you said about taking care of residents of Harrisburg. It just seems like, you know, you're forcing people to choose between having a job and taking care of their family. So I'm just trying to figure out how you would justify that in your sense of making this policy.
Hey, thanks for the question, Andrea. What I said was that we conducted internal surveys of our first responders, police, fire, and others. And if we hadn't done a required vaccine, less than 50% would have voluntarily gotten it. And these are the folks that come into contact with individuals every day, and you can't pick and choose who's having a heart attack or who you have to assist when you're a first responder. They need to be protected, and they need to protect the public which they come into contact with. And I brought it up as a talking point, and I think it is something that I haven't heard the other candidates address. I'd like to know their opinion on this, which is that we have to lead by example, especially now when there's so much misinformation about the vaccine out there. It is safe and effective, and if we're not going to get it, then we're not going to eventually get to that herd immunity that we need to have in Harrisburg so we can get past Corona. I will say our policy does have exemptions in it that can be requested. One for health reasons, and another for religious or other objections. You can't have a blanket policy that doesn't take that into account. But we've had very few exemptions so far, and I think, and we've also done a strong educational campaign to show people that the vaccine is safe and effective, and that's basically what we need to do as a citywide push, which is we've got to get our numbers up to where they need to be, especially now that the vaccine is widely available. So you can request an exemption for it, but I stand by the decision to require employees to do it, and I think that other employers should consider doing that as well.
Are there any other questions?
We have another hand up from our participants. Elise?
Yes, good afternoon. So my question is regarding the mandatory vaccine for the city workers. The vaccine, from my understanding, is not FDA approved. So a lot of people may not want to take the vaccine because of that. So how will Mayor Papenfuse adjust, or how is he going to handle that? Because a lot of people don't want to take the vaccine because it's not FDA approved.
Okay, so I'm glad we're having this conversation because it really does, I think, point out a lot of the misinformation that is out there regarding regarding the vaccines and regarding COVID. And I can tell you, as I have gone door to door in Home Manor and other parts of the city, I have encountered a lot of misinformation, a lot of vaccine hesitancy. The vaccine is safe, the vaccine is effective, and the vaccine will prevent you from getting COVID. There isn't a single death which has been linked to the vaccine. There are some common side effects like a sore arm or feeling under the weather for a little bit of time, but those are far better than the hundreds of thousands of individuals who have died because of COVID. And remember, COVID is so easy to spread that it's really not just about protecting yourself. You can be a carrier without even knowing that you have it. And you can give it to an elderly relative or somebody who's vulnerable and spread it in a way that you don't even realize you're doing it. So we have to get past the misinformation that the vaccine isn't safe and effective. It is safe and effective. We have to encourage people to take it, and we have to lead by example. And that's my position on the vaccine.
Thank you for your response. Looks like we have one more question. Mr. Parsons?
Yes. My question is about public transportation. Okay. I used to work a second shift job out by Walmart. There's like 3 or 4 warehouses out there. But for everybody with second shift that didn't have a car, the buses only go to Walmart, I believe, every 2 to 3 hours. And then to go home, there's no buses after, I believe, I'm not sure, it's 7, 8 o'clock. Second shift doesn't end at 10, 30, 11 o'clock. So that was an inconvenience. A lot of us had to catch cabs and stuff, basically taking 1/3 of our salary away every day. So I wanted to know what could be done about the transportation inside the city. It's pretty good, but outside the city where the warehouses are actually at, there's no public transportation really.
Well, I could take that if you'd like to start at least and say that, yeah, this is an issue that I feel very strongly about. We should be investing our dollars in public transportation. And it's something that goes beyond the city, as you say. It's one thing to have a route within the city, but you need routes that connect to other regions. And that's why we need a fundamental shift in the way we fund transportation in Pennsylvania. We may see an opportunity to do this through the infrastructure dollars that they're talking about in the federal government. But if you look at PennDOT's strategy for Pennsylvania, it's basically to make our roads bigger and then to toll people to pay for their improvements. And it's very, very much automobile focused. And when we talk about making a city walkable and livable and multimodal, we're talking about making it possible for people to ride a bike or get a bus. And have a sort of complete streets philosophy, which isn't just about commuters and cars. There is some hope on the horizon. We just approved a new regional transportation authority that Harrisburg is part of, that sort of expands what CAT used to do to a much broader and multi-county approach. This is something which the city will be funding, something that we can put more dollars into, and it should conceivably make it easier to have those partnerships and those new routes that go from the city to the jobs. And if you look at the statistics, while it's true that more people come into the city and work on a daily basis, it's also true that the majority of people who live in the city work outside of the city. And that just makes your argument for why we need better connections and more investments in public transportation.
Thank you, Mayor Papenfuse. Mr. Schankweiler?
Yes, thank you. This isn't an issue that we can say the county needs to do this or a regional study needs to do that. This is something, again, gets back to family sustaining wages. There are jobs out there. So what can we as a city do to help people get to those jobs? Yes, we need to work with CAT, but we also need to look at what we as a city can do as far as getting people to employment opportunities. There are jobs that have been offered. People go to those jobs. It's always the transportation issue that fails them. So is there a unique opportunity available in the city to provide that transportation to people? And I'm sure there are public-private partnerships with these businesses that they would be willing to help fund that entrepreneurial idea to get folks to their job. There are government grants available to do that. There are federal grants available to do that. We need to be a city that goes out and finds the money and deals with these issues and solves them instead of waiting for somebody else to change a rule or an emphasis or something like that.
Mr. Banks?
Yeah, am I unmuted?
Yes, sir.
All right, actually, this is kind of like a question to Eric, because when I was on city council, we subsidized capital area transit. And as a result of us providing that subsidy, that means we had a seat at the table when it came to the development of transportation routes, times, and schedules. So I guess my question to Mayor Papenfuse is that relationship no longer in existence? And if it isn't, I'd like to know why.
Okay, I'll answer that. Yes, we continue to fund CAT, and we basically subsidize their operations. CAT was part of a 3-county grouping. It was Dauphin County, Cumberland County, and the city. The new Regional Transportation Authority is broader than that, and the city also has seats on that board, and will be putting forth nominations for new board members there. In part because there needs to be we need to look at it in a larger regional way. The jobs aren't just in Dauphin County and Cumberland County. It's a larger, and the hub of the system operates out of the city. So we fought over the years to keep the routes in the city of Harrisburg, but frankly, we've seen resistance from surrounding counties and others to make those types of cross-county connections. And that's something that we need to do a better job at.
Mr. Banks, did you want to respond? Your mic is muted.
Again, that pretty much just underscores what I've been saying this entire time. We have these things in place. We just have a mayor who doesn't, he's just not actively engaged. Had he been actively engaged, we've been able to fully address Mr. Parsons' issue. We fund capital area transit. We have a seat at the table. If we know our people work in these areas, then we need to make it clear, if they want to continue to receive our funding and resources, these are the shifts that we need, and these are the routes that must be included. Thank you.
Our contribution to capital area transit's a tiny amount of money, $100,000 or so a year out of a multi-million-dollar budget. The predominant amount is funded by PennDOT, not the city, not the county. And that's why I started the conversation with recognizing that we do need change on the state level, and we need to focus on something other than highway expansion, which is what you see going on in this region and in Harrisburg. And that's something that the city has actually very strongly fought against. We funded our own study to show that the expansion of 83 was unnecessary. We've adopted Vision Zero policies, in some cases over PennDOT's objections, to improve the walkability and the safety of streets like Front Street and Forster Street and State Street. And we continue to push for a safer and more walkable city of Harrisburg.
Thank you for that. It looks like we have one more question.
Okay, thank you again. So my question is to current mayor and the contenders. I don't know if that's the correct word, but what is going to be done about the city streets? Literally on every city street, there are potholes, some the sizes of baby bathtubs. Like the city streets are so horrible. From South 17th Street, from one end all the way to the other. Berry Hill Street. There are so many city streets that the city streets really need some attention to them. So again, I heard someone speak on the construction on 83, yes, but what about our city streets? Because we have to travel those as well. And we want our neighborhoods to be safe. Car repairs, we're in a rough time right now. And these potholes are really damaging to our vehicles. But I would like to know what's going to be done about the city streets.
I'll go in on that. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes,
Hello?
I hear you.
Okay. My strategy to address that issue is two-tiered. First, of course, is identify the federal and well as state funding subsidies that are going to be available and time those subsidies in concert with the training modules of the union. So my objective is to not only identify the funding that's going to be utilized for the repair of our city streets, but also tie it to the training modules of the unions to ensure that our residents are trained and prepared to be able to take on those jobs once they're made available and the resources are made available. The problem that we've had in this city is every time that there's a major construction project, instead of hiring local contractors and local people, we bring in people from New Jersey, Maryland, and even York, Pennsylvania. If we're going to build a stronger city, if we're going to empower our residents and create a better quality of life, we need to start by injecting capital into our economy. And the way we do that is by providing jobs to our community members.
Thank you. Mr. Schankweiler?
Yes, thank you. You know, it's interesting you mentioned 17th Street. Going out to knock on doors the other night, I hit a pothole, sliced my tire, and it's $300 later. So and it's all over the city. It's the number 4 complaint at the door. Number of things, you know, the city has money to utilize to repair our roads. It's got $30 million in the fund that could be utilized toward roads and, quite frankly, toward a number of other things that aren't being taken care of in the city. So there isn't even a scheduled plan on how to look at our city streets, which ones have priority and which ones need to be done. That's called a capital plan, and it needs to be communicated to the citizens as far as what's going to happen to their roads. One other comment I'd like to make. It was mentioned that we're going to be getting a very large sum of money from the federal government for infrastructure and other items. If I were the current mayor right now, I'd already have my plan in place on how I'm going to utilize that money. Even though it's not totally detailed on that money, we should be ready now, because what's going to happen is every other town and city, school district, county are also getting money. Vendors are going to be needed to make the repairs, to do improvements, and it's not going to be able to be done. I'd be working now to line up my vendors to fix our streets and fix our infrastructure and look at our broadband and any number of items, so that I'd lock them in before a lot of these other governments get there, because there aren't enough people to pave streets once this money starts flowing from the federal government. And then we're going to still be behind the 8 ball. Had I been in office for all these years, I'd have a plan for this community as far as dealing with this large issue that I hear about every night at the doors.
Okay, well, Dave, we do have a plan, and let me tell you about it. And the plan for the federal rescue money is UBI. That's what you just heard. It's not infrastructure, because that's not what we're talking about. This is money which is coming to put money in people's pockets and address a legacy of systemic racism and poverty, and to help people rebound from COVID. There is talk of an infrastructure bill right now on the federal government. I hope we'll see another, we'll see another pot of millions of dollars that we can use for infrastructure. But the first order of business is UBI. And again, despite asking, I haven't heard if you support that or not. Now, with regard to a comprehensive plan for paving our streets, again, you don't know what you're talking about. We have done a study. We know every street in the city. They're all graded. There's a priority list, and we know it's going to cost $150 million, $150 million just to pave the streets that need paving, not the streets that are in decent condition in the city of Harrisburg. So fundamentally, it's a financial issue. Why did it get that bad? It got that bad because the last time we had a city paving plan was back in the 1990s. And we had to scrap that along with everything else for the city, because people like Otto Banks went on city council, voted for the incinerator. And the incinerator bankrupted the city of Harrisburg and caused us to have hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. And as a result, since we were spending money on the wrong things, we weren't spending it on infrastructure. What have we done? We've brought the city's finances back. We've gotten out of distressed city status. We've had millions of dollars that we've been able to save up, money which is important for us to have, and money which was able to help us get through COVID and respond to COVID quickly. And we're in a position now where we are going to be able to borrow again. Going to city council this Tuesday are a series of bills, including a restructuring of our debt, the advertising for an underwriter, an agreement with the ICA, which you quit, all of which are there to help the city be able to responsibly address its infrastructure needs. They're big price tags, but they are price tags that we can begin to address now. And we're going to do it through a citywide street paving plan. And we're already doing it if you look throughout the city and you look at the construction. One last comment, a lot of the roads are in bad shape and being torn up, especially in certain wards of the city, in part because of all the underground infrastructure which is needed to be replaced. Capital Region Water, UGI, they're all out there digging up the streets in an effort to address this sort of 100-year-old infrastructure problem that we have. And that has to be done before the streets are paved. It's being done now, and it's setting the stage for a citywide paving plan to come soon.
Thank you. Mr. Banks, did you have a response? You had your hand up?
Absolutely. Am I unmuted?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Eric, again, he just cannot help himself. The incinerator project really had three major components, which was the financing part, the construction, and the oversight. I was only there for the vote for the financing, for the incinerator to take place. Had I not voted on the front end on the financing, our city would have fell into utter economic chaos. Now, the other two phases took place under President Wanda Williams' leadership. So I think that's a question that should be directed to Mr. Papenfuse's running mate, seeing as though that they agree on every issue. With that being said, again, I just want to make a point of clarification in terms of the role that I played, which was specifically on voting in the affirmative for the financing. And of course, when it came to the construction part and the oversight, that pretty much took place under Ms. Williams' watch and the other subsequent members of council who were negligent in their responsibilities.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. And looks like we have our final question because we are about to be out of time. Mr. Parsons?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I'm a veteran, so if I become homeless as a man, the VA helps me out. Now, 2 months ago, me and my fiance, we went to feed the homeless downtown. And out of feeding 27 people, 21 were men. So for men in Harrisburg that become homeless, they have the mission on 6th Street that you can stay there 30 days. And then I believe you can go to the Y for another 30 days, but that's not long-term. For women, they have long-term programs up to 4 to 6 months. So I want to know, does anyone have a suggestion on how we can help the homeless men in our community so they can get their families together and get back on their feet? Especially as far as the housing is concerned.
Mayor Papenfuse, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to tell you about one project which is on the horizon here, which I think will make a difference. It's something the city's supporting, and it's basically a tiny house village project that is planned for South Harrisburg. This is the sort of uninhabited area south of the green belt, past the PennDOT building where there used to be an old industrial landscape there. We're putting together a development which will not only have tiny houses for homeless veterans to transition back into housing, but we'll also have a community center and a lot of resources available. It's an example of, I think, something very positive and something which will hopefully replace some of the homeless encampments in the area. And that has made its way through the zoning process. So it should enter into construction soon.
Mr. Schankweiler?
First of all, Ron, thank you for what you're doing for that community. You're one of several nonprofits and just individuals who are taking upon themselves to help our homeless population, especially our veterans. So thanks for doing that. We're in a crisis situation with our homeless population here in the city. And many people say it seems like it's increasing, and it is. We've got a great number of nonprofits that are trying to alleviate the crisis, but unfortunately, it just keeps coming. We need a plan in the city. We need to look at how we meet the need of that homeless population. And I would do that under my commission for affordable housing and homelessness. It also would not just be the housing piece, but the social services that go along with that. Mental illness is a big issue with our homeless population. I know that because my church in the city, during the winter months, we house the homeless overnight in our church basement. I've gotten to talk with them as a volunteer, having stayed there overnight, gotten to know many of them in their stories. And it's a complicated issue. And we've got to get to the root cause and put together a solid network of systems for those individuals.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Banks.
Yes. And Dave actually did hit on some very good points, because it's the truth. Homelessness takes on many faces. Some of the people that are homeless are there as a result of mental illness. Some, we must remember not to rule out the fact that they just like living independently and being off the grid. There is a demographic that prefers that lifestyle as well. But then there's also the group that does need help. And what we need to do is engage them more on the current social service programs that are at our disposal. Many of them, although they're camped outside of the Department of Social Service here in the city of Harrisburg and far as Dauphin County, but yet are reluctant to walk through the doors and access and request additional help. But of course, I have a good friend named Aisha Mobley, who is very instrumental with the CAN network, and they're trying to provide as many different programs as well as options to support that particular demographic. And of course, we just need to put our money where our mouth is. If we say we want to help people, we have the resources to do it, and then we should. It's really that simple. We have resources, entities, and resources that currently provide these services. We must coordinate those services, tie them to the resources that are available, and make sure that these people that are homeless, that need and want help, will be able to access it. Thank you.
Thank you. It is now 2:02, so I'm going to wrap it up. But thank you guys for attending. I appreciate the candidates for coming out or joining us to address the concerns of the community. For the representatives, thank you for everything you've done for our community or done in our community, and thank you for participating. For the viewers, I ask that you just spread the word and promote voter participation. The last day to register for the primaries is May 3rd. The primary election is May 18th. So I just charge all you guys to come out and be a part of voting and putting, electing our next mayor as well as our other officials. This will be available on Facebook. We're going to share this with other local pages as well as stream it on our YouTube page. So if you would like to revisit or share with anyone, feel free to do so. Our email is on the page right now, or surviveintel1@gmail.com. Feel free to contact us with any concerns. And I also just want to thank our promoters who assisted us in our calls, Junk Busters. You can call for any of your junk and hauling services, as well as Dyewood Construction, and the very, very relevant and prevalent in our community with helping to rehab homes. Thank you, everyone. And we're going to go ahead and end this meeting. And I appreciate all of your time.
Thank you.